Hi, everybody, and thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you also to the Stony Batter Festival for having us once again. The Stony Batter Festival is one of Lilliput's favourite annual events, so we're absolutely thrilled to be invited back and to bring you a wonderful event. Today we have Declan Murphy in conversation with Cian Cardiff. They're going to be talking about nature during the pandemic and how it's really important to get young people into nature. um, so a bit about them both. Declan is an author and naturalist. He has worked extensively with Birdwatch Ireland. He's written for various publications and he also has two books. The first one is called A Life in the Trees and it came out with Lilliput in 2019. And his second book has just recently come out this year. It's gorgeous. It's about trying to find a kingfisher and it's a journey through his own life as well. And you can see here at the very front of the cover, that's his companion Lucy, who we're hoping will be in the video up next. She's gorgeous. Um, Also, we have Cian Cardiff, and he is a young Irish birder and an ornithological surveyor. He has his own Facebook page. It's called The Life of an Irish Birder. You should check it out, and there you will find some birding news, some birding updates, birding tales, all things birds. So I'm going to pass it over to Cian and Declan now, and I hope you enjoy.
Hi, Cian. How are you?
I'm good, Declan, and yourself?
Not too bad. Thanks for joining me today for a chat about birds, and thanks to the Stony Batter Arts Festival for inviting both of us to have a chat. It's funny, while I was waiting to start off today's meeting, I was actually just reading the local paper, just popped in through my letterbox, the local paper, the Wicklow Times. I was having a quick look through it, and I was actually fascinated to see the amount of environmental stuff that was in it, concerning young people, parents. There's a huge interest in the environment now. And I was looking through it, and there was all these like parents with their children showing them walks in wildflower meadows, places like that. I was thinking back to when, like, I remember meeting you when you were only 7, I think it was. You were birdwatching with your mum and dad, and that's when I was starting. I started when I was 7 as well. And that just struck me as interesting. Was your mum and dad interested in nature when I met you first when you were 7? They were taking you out birdwatching. Were they interested in birds?
My father would have been, since he was, I suppose, about 7 as well. But my mother never really took too much of an interest. But she was always delighted that I had a strong interest in nature because it kept me out of trouble, really, and it gave me something to focus on and maybe make a career out of, which I'm lucky to have done now at the moment, anyway. So.
Yeah, that sounds very similar to me. Like, because when my mum and dad had no interest in nature at all, and like you were saying, they did it to, I suppose, keep me out of trouble. It's because what I was interested in. And now I have my own kids, and of course I'm the only person that's interested in nature. I'm trying to pass it on to them. And some of the children now don't have it, and it struck me that this is something that I think you're born with.
Yeah.
Like, mum and dad weren't interested in nature. Well, your dad, sorry, you're saying was. Neither of my parents were. So it's not something I picked up from them. It's something I obviously had. It's obviously something you had.
Yeah, exactly.
When I was looking at all these things in the papers there about these other parents showing their children, I mean, do you think it's something you're actually born with, or is it something everybody, like, if you don't have it, can you get interested in nature? I suppose that's the question a lot of people want to know.
Yeah.
If you're not born with it, like, with an interest in it like us.
I suppose you could get into it as such, but maybe not to the extent that we would be, with the interest that we would have. Whereas it's a daily occurrence for us. Like, we go outside the door and you're listening to birds, you're looking at birds the whole time, or nature in general. Whereas some people might just go and look at nature the occasional time and not look at anything when they're out walking with their earphones in and stuff like that,
Yeah, that's very true. And it's funny when you say that. You've said exactly what some of the people who read my books come up and said to me, because, as you said, we go about and we do this all the time. We go out, we hear the birds, we see the birds. It's kind of part of us. It's part of our being.
Yeah.
I don't know if you found this, but people who aren't like that find this really hard to relate to. Like, people come up to me and kind of say like, I'd love to be able to go out and see the birds the way you see them. You go out and you hear the birds. And you're saying, yeah. And I said, like that woodpecker that it's calling there. And they're going, how did you hear that? Because I'm here beside you and I didn't hear it. And I think some people are more tuned in. Definitely. Some people are, they're more just attuned with it. But I think probably anybody can get it. But it's interesting that your parents were, although they didn't have it themselves, your mother didn't have it, your father, as you said, did, neither my parents did. It's something that they did see in us and kind of encourage us, you know, to kind of go, you know, to keep us out of trouble. I do like that phrase. It gives the impression that we need to be kept off the streets.
Yeah, well, maybe at times.
Well, certainly when I was growing up, and my parents were kind of getting me interested, well, not getting me, facilitating my interest in nature. Coming through school, there was no interest in nature. And it's interesting what you said there, that it gave you something that you're making a career out of, which I'd love to chat to you about later on. That's something when I was coming up through school just didn't exist. I mean, environmentalism, there just was no, going to UCD to study zoology was about the only thing that had any connection, I suppose, with nature. So certainly when I was coming through school, if you liked nature, you were a weirdo. That's basically the only way to it. Now, there's an emphasis on it that I think children growing up now, it's very much, they understand the importance to it. Like, okay, you're a good few years younger than me, but you've left school a few years. Like, when you were coming up through school, did you find it difficult being interested in birds, or was everybody so involved in nature even back then that it was okay? Like, was it okay to be a bird watcher when you were?
No, when I was in school, no one in my year that I knew of in the whole school had an interest in birds or nature, really. So it was very difficult. To be honest, from a young age, I never really told anyone, apart from close friends, that I was interested in birds or bird watching, because they just think, wow, this guy's weird. It's just such a strange thing to do. But they don't seem to understand that perhaps maybe like football or any other sports or anything, it's just exactly like that. It's just a passion that you're born with, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah. Because like, no, coming up through school now with me, there was nothing, and it was a sports school. Everybody was interested in sports, but there wasn't the awareness, I think, of environmentalism, and certainly there was no prospect of getting a career in it. Now, you were saying that it helps you kind of get a career. What career are you going into with birds? Is it
so? Luckily enough, with hard work as well, and guidance from my parents, I suppose, and help from other birders and bird watchers as well. So I'm going into the ornithological surveyor. So that's what I do. I go out and monitor bird migration and stuff like that, to do with offshore wind farms in on the east coast of Ireland. So I've been lucky to get into that line of work, and I also do bits and pieces of bird guiding as well. So touring around Ireland with people that are interested to see what Ireland has to offer in terms of birds.
That's certainly the whole thing that you're saying about the offshore surveying, the wind farms. I mean, that's only going to grow now with, you know, big issues with climate change. That they weren't there like when I was coming through school. So I mean, there was no, that whole area of employment just didn't exist. So I mean, maybe the fact that there's opportunities now will help encourage teachers to encourage younger people into it. But I think it's funny that, I mean, bird watching can kind of open up doors into all sorts of ways. Like, okay, I've written 2 books now on birds, and those many of those, both those books refer back to taking notes, which is something you do and I do automatically. It's you know, you're as part of being a bird watcher, you're kind of taking notes. It's something that I kind of find that an awful lot of people, they probably think this is the most nerdiest, geekiest aspect of actually watching nature that there is. It stands out in my mind, going right back to I think my French teacher in school. They were trying to kind of get me prepared for the French orals, and they were teaching me about how to talk about bird migration in French, which was a disaster. I could hardly talk about it in English, so it was a disaster to talk about it in French. But they were asking to explain notes, and I think this is a misconception, because I know you're a good note taker, that the whole concept of bird watching, people have this idea, I think, with birds, that you go out, you sit and you look at them, and you write down, today I saw a kingfisher, today I saw, or you saw one woodpecker, one grey-crested grebe, and one sparrowhawk. You write those 3 birds down. You have a little notebook and you just write a list. And I think, I don't know, has that perception changed? But certainly when I was growing up, there was that perception that bird watching was really just like list making, in the sense of like train spotting.
Train spotting.
That you collected the birds, you ticked them off, and you wrote them down in your notebook. Sparrow, starling, mallard. I think, that's something that a lot of people don't realize, that I suppose when we talk about taking notes and writing about birds, we're doing an awful lot more about that. It's not, well, I find when I write my notes, they're a narrative.
Yeah.
Would your notes be like that as well? Like a sort of a diary almost of the whole experience, the birds, the environment, the setting you're in?
Yeah, a lot of my notes would be kind of detailed stuff to do with identification work, usually. So if I see something kind of interesting that maybe I haven't seen that kind of plumage or something before, or maybe if it's a rarity or something like that, I might take extensive kind of notes. But in terms of common birds, it'd be more like a diary, as you say.
Yeah, and it's funny, those diaries can actually very much lead into the whole art of writing then from there on. Because I think all the good famous naturalists, will always refer back to the nature diaries they kept as a child.
Yeah.
And I've still got some of my nature diaries going back to when I was 7 or 8 here, and even the writing of those recent books, I've looked back and I've referred back to them. So it's kind of funny that bird watching, I've kind of one of the teachers back then, there's so much potential. It seems to be a strange interest for a lot of people, just going out and looking at birds. But nowadays there is kind of, I suppose, opportunities. There's jobs, there's kind of careers. As you said, you can go out, you can do survey work. And then, like for me, I suppose there's writing, and you can branch into that. Do you find when you're out, I suppose, looking at the birds, do you find it better to be by yourself or to be with someone? Because the Irish birding community, for many of the viewers who are watching here today, something they haven't experienced. And the Irish bird watching community is quite unique, really.
That's for sure.
It's a very unique thing. But the great thing about bird watching and being part of a bird watching community or a naturalist community is that you can be part of the community, but you're still allowed to go off by yourself. You can be with people. You don't have to hang out of each other. You don't have to be in each other's pockets all the time. It's not like if you want to have a game of football, you have to have the other player in the team. You can't play it. With bird watching, it's very much that you can have people with you. You can socialize, or you can go your own way.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's do you prefer being with a group of people, or do you prefer watching your birds by yourself?
It'd be 50-50, I suppose, because I do bits and pieces of bird guiding and walks and talks on occasions. I like the group aspects at times, but it's nice if you're feeling stressed or anything like that. Or I do a lot of kind of sound recording and stuff as well. So then it's nice to be by yourself, because you don't need background noise from people talking all the time or cars and stuff going around. So yeah, it'd be definitely a bit of 50-50, I suppose, for me.
It's interesting. I mean, when you said one of the real in-words there now, when you said when you're feeling stressed, and there's so much talk now, especially after during the pandemic, people with stress, people going to nature, getting out, outside together. People are now unquestionably in the last year being more stressed than they have been possibly for at any point in their lives. Do you find nature's good antidote for stress? I certainly do. I certainly find, for me, if I'm stressed, that's the only thing that works. I need to just get out.
Yeah, I'd be absolutely the same. Yeah, absolutely the same. The same for me, because obviously for the lockdowns were very difficult for everyone. So I think being able to branch out and go birding was fantastic. Even within our 5K, because I'm lucky to live by the sea, so I just go down and just look offshore and see if I could find anything. And of course, the brown booby and greystones turned up during the pandemic, so we were all looking enough to see something like that.
That was quite an amazing. That was almost a year ago. That was July. Was it June or July?
It was indeed. Yeah, it's coming up to a year now very soon.
I mean, you probably actually do know where the distribution of a brown booby. I know because you're an expert on seabirds. Where the brown booby, like it's a tropical species. So where's its nearest breeding grounds to here?
So more than likely that bird probably came from the Caribbean, I'd imagine, somewhere in that kind of region. So quite a bit out of its normal range in greystones.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bird, I suppose, that many of us, for lack of a better term, really serious bird watchers would be looking for, but we'd be looking for when we're sea watching, which is when you're watching birds migrating past a headland or a cliff. None of us ever expected it to turn up in Greystones and Wicklow. That was a great thing.
Absolutely not.
And that actually was something that brought the whole bird community together. Really. The bird
exactly. Yeah. It was.
There was people from all over Ireland travelled that day to see that bird.
And it even brought the general public together as well, because everyone was so interested, because this was such a rare bird to see in their local village or town at this stage. But just something so rare to see that a lot of people actually took interest, and maybe hopefully might continue with that interest after seeing that beautiful bird.
Yeah, there was, like, that got onto television, it got onto the radio, but in some ways, again, it showed the mad aspect of the birdwatching community that a lot of people associate birdwatching with, which, I suppose neither you or I would be doing all the time. We all go after our rare birds.
Yeah.
That showed, I suppose, the absolute extreme end. That there was people from Kerry, there was people from Northern Ireland, there was people from everywhere that just drove from one side of the country to the other, just to see this bird. But I suppose the other aspect of it is really, as I said, just a quiet aspect for de-stressing when you go out. I find nature a great way to de-stress. You obviously do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
I think that the interests, the young people coming up now, and there seems to be a lot of interest in nature, do you think they're coming into it because to get away from stress? Do you think, even in your own age group, the people, do you find that the stress levels nowadays are higher, just the way the modern world is? That do you think that it's needed, the nature as an antidote, more than, for example, when I was growing up? I certainly wasn't back then, but the world didn't seem to be as stressful as it does now.
Yeah. Well, I suppose growing up in the kind of years that I did and going to secondary school, nature was always important for me to get out into, and I tried to kind of not push too much, but give a boost maybe to my friends and say, look, you go out for a walk into the woods or something and listen to the birds. It's great for de-stressing, but I think these days there's a lot of pressure on people with social media and stuff like that. There's a lot of pressure in school to get huge amount of points in the likes of your leaving certificate and stuff, so you can go on and do extraordinary college courses that at the end of the day might not get you anywhere. So it's just important to go with what you think yourself, I think.
All right. And as well as the birds, I mean, you do the sound recording, the photography. Are you interested in any other aspects of natural history? Would you be very much focused on the birds, or would you be more of a naturalist in general? Would you have a good understanding of other fields?
Yeah, I suppose I'd have a good understanding of other stuff like mammals and fish, and at a young age I was always interested in whales and dolphins. That's actually kind of where my love for nature kind of sparked, was kind of stuff like that, watching them on the TV. Yeah, but I kind of branched out then more so into birds, but I'd always be still very interested in the whole range of everything from insects to bears and anything to do with nature and the outdoors.
Yeah, no, because I was very much birds like yourself are the main focus. I'd spend a lot of the time with looking at other types of wildlife, and I think the book I did there recently now, well, between the two of them, I've covered, you know, animals such as pine martens, badgers, foxes. And again, these are animals like the birds that are out there all the time. And it never ceases to amaze me how few people have seen an awful lot of these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've met people, you know, who live in the country, and they turn around and they say, when you say that I was writing about a badger, and they said, where would you get the information to write about a badger? Like, I've lived in the country and I've never seen them. You come across a lot. I'm sure you come across that quite a bit as well. But it's some of the commonest things, and people say like, oh, I've never seen that, and I've lived here all my life. Like, and I don't know, is it that people? I think you have to go that extra mile, I think, to see some things, to see wildlife. If you want to see a badger, the way I always say to people, like badgers and owls, a bird, there's an example, a bird and an animal, they both come out at night, at nocturnal. You won't, without a bit of effort, you're not going to see them by chance, really.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't really see a badger, which means you've got to make an effort to see them. And that means basically you've got to go out in the dark.
Yeah.
Which straight away is starting to sound a bit weird because as you know, both badgers and owls a lot of the time, depending on the species, live in woodland. So now you're going into a woodland at night in the dark, so it's getting stranger and stranger. And an awful lot of people just don't seem to want to do this, which that's fair enough, that's a choice. But what I kind of find really strange is that, because I see it now with an awful lot of the younger children, my kids growing up, that if the children want to do that, an awful lot of people feel that, you know, not to encourage. Like, if a 10-year-old girl says, I'd love to go to the woods tonight and go and sit up a tree and watch badgers, an awful lot of people would talk her out of that. It's not safe to do that. You know, you shouldn't do that. That's weird. That's really, really weird to do that. You know, that's not normal. So it's kind of quite hard, I think, for some of the young people coming up now to get that kickstart.
Yeah.
I mean, did you feel that a group or a mentor benefited you, or would have benefited you, or like if there's someone who kind of says like, I'd love to do that, but how do you do it? It's not safe for a 10-year-old to go walking off by the woods. Yeah. Should it be something that they have that the parent has to do, or do you think that there's room somewhere? Do you think this is something the schools should go into?
I think probably all of the above. I know certainly when I was growing up that my father was very interested in birds, and my grandfather was the same. So they always would have pushed me to continue my interests. And school, the occasional teacher might take an interest in birds and try and help you progress your love for nature, but like in terms of subjects, there was very little to do with birds and nature, really. So it was kind of all left behind almost, and just focus on what we're meant to be here for.
Well, the sad reality is then, coming back to what, as I said at the very start, that where I got that thought from was when I saw the paper, all that articles, you know, that were talking about all the wonderful things that, you know, the children were doing, and the parents and the interest in nature and environment. It's still very hard for a young person to get involved in nature. You know, despite all our awareness of nature, there's still a lot to be done. We're very aware. We're very aware of climate change. We're very aware of that. But for the boy who wants to go off at 10 and look at birds, for the girl who wants to go and look at a fox or a badger, it's still a huge difficulty to do that. There's a lot of things, both society and school are kind of against that almost. Would you think that's a fair point?
Yeah, definitely. I think that a mentor is definitely something that anyone would be grateful of. And I was lucky enough, I suppose, growing up, that I went to Birdwatch Ireland outings when I was a kid with my father, and they were run by Niall Keogh on the Wicklow branch, and he kind of took me under his wing because I suppose he was maybe 25 or 26 at that stage, and he was just fantastic. And from the first day on I met him, he was always extremely helpful and just kept my interest up, to be honest, the whole time.
That makes a difference. I know Niall well, like, you know, that makes an enormous difference. Like, I had mentors as well. Naturally, they were older than me, so I mean, the problem is that really that puts the pressure on you almost to become a mentor now for someone else.
Yeah, yeah. If I could find anyone.
Yeah, just it's kind of hard because really, you need a young person to be a mentor to a young person.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
which is a shame, because I mean, there's so much stuff that even you, like, have able to pass on. Like you were saying that your particular passion is identification.
Yeah. Sure.
Now, I suppose without getting too in deep to that, because some people find that quite very in depth.
Don't want to bore anyone.
What does that mean? I suppose at a simple level, to someone who's kind of saying, well, identifying like there's a robin. It's a robin. I've identified it. That's the end of it, isn't it? Is there more to it than that?
Yeah, there's more to it, all right. It can get quite in depth and quite difficult at times. But I suppose even when you're looking at your robin in the back garden, say in October or November, the thing is, you can always wonder, where has this bird come from? Because there could be certain markings. The bird may have more grey on it, so maybe this bird has come from Scandinavia and is not the bird that you're used to landing on your shovel every time you're digging in the back garden. So it's stuff like that I find extremely interesting, to find out where these actual birds are coming from, whether they are our garden birds or they're coming from the continent or even further afield, like Asia or North America,
Surely a robin wouldn't come from Asia. One of our robins, would it?
No, they wouldn't. But in terms of other species of birds, yeah.
Because I know robins do move around, and as you're saying, that's quite a surprise to a lot of people that
absolutely.
There's a robin in your garden all the time. My dad was great for that. He could never really grasp that concept. And he goes, "Oh, there's my friend, the robin. He's been there for the last 25 years. Every time I go out back door, he's waiting for me." And I never managed to get through to him. But no, that was not the same robin for the last 25 years. Really, that was
exactly.
They move in and they move out, and they move. There's other ones from other countries, as I say, move in here. I think that's the start of us starting to recognize individuals what identifications about, really. And the first thing is you identify the species as, we'll say, a robin, and then you learn to identify an individual, and then you build it up and take it from there. But like you've taken it to the absolute next level now. You've gone on to these birds called gulls, which are in some ways,
for my sins.
I think it's fair to say that they're definitely a bird you either love or hate. Even as bird watchers, I think bird watchers either love gulls or hate gulls.
They despise them.
Like, I suppose you've picked actually the hardest thing to try and sell, really, whatever about. Like, I mean, the books I write about, I'm writing about birds that are colourful, like kingfishers, that people would know, that are unusual, like goose standers, a fish-eating duck up in Wicklow, or that are charismatic, like woodpeckers that are Wicklow. So I've kind of taken the easy things, so kind of that people can kind of latch on. You've kind of decided to plow your own furrow and kind of said, right, I'm going to take the one bird that everybody kind of will walk away as soon as I mention. And they're the ones that we see foraging in dustbins and sitting on roofs, and for many people,
stealing people's food.
We'll say they all look the same.
Absolutely. So, I hear that nearly every day.
What's your fascination with gulls over all the other birds?
I suppose it's the identification aspect of gulls, really, that there's so much in depth to do with different plumages of even one species. Like, for example, the herring gull. There's so much variation within the herring gull, even European birds, without bringing in birds from North America or anything like that. So I suppose that's it, really. And I'd like to be able to bring what I've learned so far to the Irish public anyway, to try and encourage people to get into gull identification. So we'd find out a lot more about gulls in years to come if more people are looking, rather than a small minority of people that are mad keen on them,
Yeah, because they are a bird that's, I suppose, they're very easy for people to see if they wanted it, although they're not necessarily attractive to look in many cases. They're actually, I suppose, they're a good beginner's bird because they're big.
Yeah,
they're easy to see. A lot of cases you can go down to Bray Harbour, Wicklow Harbour, and throw out a piece of bread and they'll come in. So it's not like you're looking at a small little brown bird hopping around in a hedge and, you know, dropping down. It's hard to see. They tend to sit right out in front of you. And as you said, that there's this infinite variety, which is something I covered, I suppose, in depth. Quite, it's always fascinated me, I suppose, with all aspects of nature, is just the sheer range and variety that every time you look at something, you're seeing something new. And I don't mean something just new to yourself, but you're seeing something that nobody's ever seen before. Like if you lift over a stone and there's woodlice underneath, the chances are you're the very first person who has ever seen some of those woodlice ever.
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
is an amazing actual thought. Like you've actually done something new. You know, you've seen something that nobody has ever seen before. And I suppose that infinite variety for you transfers into the gulls. That when you're looking at we'll say a herring gull or something like that, that you're looking at something that has never a plumage that you've never seen before, or a pattern you've never seen before.
Yeah, absolutely. There's like, even as I say, and you say yourself, within herring gulls, there's just an extreme variation. So from a young age, I would have went into the likes of Bray Harbour, as you mentioned, with my father, and then as I got a bit older myself, and I found carrying a camera was very important. So photographing the birds and then going home and looking at different stages of the molt where the birds start to lose their feathers and grow new ones is very important to do with identification. So it's just, it is a complex subject, but I think if it was explained a little bit better in a bird guide or something to our people, they might take a bit of a better interest. That's my hope anyway.
You're saying some of the work you're doing, the offshore work, you're saying you're doing offshore work. So naturally, you have to know your goals for that, we'll say.
Yeah.
So I suppose so identifying the birds is one stage. You know how to do that now. Bird watching is also your job, okay? So you're using those skills out when you're doing your survey work. What are the gulls telling us when during that? So the information that's coming back then. So now, I mean, in the greater picture, I suppose, of the environment, what are the gulls telling us? Is the world are they doing well in the world? Is the environment affecting them? Or are they affecting the environment? To an awful lot of people, a very common expression is they're called winged rats. So that they're not beneficial to nature. They're brown, they're bullies, we don't want them, we don't need them. And I would come across quite a lot of that. They're not pretty. We want pretty birds. We like kingfishers and woodpeckers that you write about. They're colourful and pretty. We don't like Keane's gulls. They're ugly. They're bullies, so.
Exactly. Yeah.
But like, what do they have a purpose? Like, what should we be watching out for them? Should we be protecting them? I suppose is the big thing. Like, do you think they're part of the ecosystem? They're your favorite bird?
Yeah, I think so, because I think any nature or any bird or animal has its part to play in its role in the ecosystem. I know the likes of gulls and stuff a lot of them will eat other birds, chicks and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's birds need to eat. Like everyone loves to see a sparrowhawk or a buzzard taking like a wood pigeon or something. But at the end of the day, a gull taking a chick that's kind of the same thing. So I think a lot of people need to open their minds up a little bit more to do with gulls. I understand, like in the likes of cities and stuff. I was in Dublin City myself today, and they're just everywhere, and they're actually in the way on the footpaths, and they're kind of crapping and everything all over the place when you're trying to eat food. So I suppose you wouldn't really get sparrowhawks and buzzards doing that in the middle of the city, but it's something I think we need to adapt to.
Yeah, well, that's there's still, I've certainly found that this with people, although people are getting more interested in nature and they understand the importance of it, I think there's still an aspect that they like the nice nature. Like as you said, like that they don't like seeing the sparrowhawks taking the chicks. Like I get that an awful lot of people come across that there's too many birds of prey. They'll kill all the birds. You've heard that argument as well, which of course can't happen. No predator can out eat its prey. Otherwise it'd just be basically killing itself if it was to eat all its prey. So that's never going to happen. But
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, an awful lot of people still, I suppose, that they feel that nature is something that needs to be controlled. Do you?
Yeah.
You still kind of agree with that? Come across? Yeah, they kind of feel that someone has to control the foxes, someone has to control things, or they'll kill everything, as though we're not actually killing everything.
Yeah, well,
it's actually people kind of mistake that point.
I think we're definitely much worse than any of the nature that's out there for wrecking the place. To be honest, that's for sure.
So, if you were to pick another bird other than gulls, which bird would appeal to you? So, what birds would appeal to you strongly?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I suppose herons, really, the heron family. They were, they were another genre of birds, so to speak, that got me in very interested. When I went to Portugal as a kid, I was watching white storks in nesting up on top of rooftops. And when I came back to Ireland, then I obviously knew we didn't have them here. So I found the closest bird, which was probably the grey heron. And herons have always just been one of my favorite types of birds now for many years.
The great thing about herons is that they're an easy bird for starting children off into bird watching as well, because there's not too many birds to look at. But they still, even to this day, an awful lot of people mix them up with the crane. I don't know if you ever come across that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But, which is a totally different bird, as we know, we very rarely get here in Ireland. But loads of people kind of said, and I even recently met somebody who said there was a crane down in Broadloch, and I was trying to chat to them about the herons, and they were saying, "Oh no, it was bigger than a heron." I think that's something that it's great that people are becoming aware and looking at the things, and seeing that at least they're noticing. I certainly, going down to Broadloch now, which is a place you go down to yourself here in Wicklow Town quite a lot. Certainly during the pandemic, it's got busy. There's a lot more people up and
absolutely.
down. But I think the people do seem to be more interested in the nature down there. I get stopped all the time asking, what are you watching? Do you get that as well? People stopping you?
Yeah, it'd be regular enough, and especially if you tell them that there's something interesting there, they really want to have a look at it, and they'll go home and tell their friends or their family that they saw maybe something like an osprey, which was there a couple of weeks ago down at Broadloch, which is only maybe 10 minutes from their house. So this fantastic bird that's come up from Africa on its way maybe to probably the UK, Scotland, somewhere to breed, has stopped off in this small estuary in Wicklow to feed, and they're kind of mesmerised by it, as most birders are as well.
Yeah, because they're spectacular birds. And that bird in question was still at Broadloch only a few days ago, so they decided to stay for a week anyway. And I think it gave entertainment to a lot of people watching it fish. And you kind of hope then that some of that stuff that you're passing on might somehow filter down to people who might be able to make those changes, like in the schools, and try and pass on that interest that we both have. I suppose that'd be our wish for both of us, really, wouldn't it?
It would. Yeah.
The things that we can pass on. Yeah.